So what was the other thing you said you wanted to circle back to?
Well, you were describing what you're hoping to do in this podcast, and you were saying how, the goal as Christians is to really be in front of Jesus and say, hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So two things come to mind. I mean, if you were in front of Jesus right now, do you think? What do you think he would say to you? Is one, and then two, with Billy Graham just passing away, just your thoughts on, him being, a faithful servant. Like, I heard an interesting quote where it said, the quote was, Billy Graham chose to obey and follow God and turn the world upside down. And he was, literally in front of kings and presidents and had an impact that reached millions, maybe even billions. I don't know.
He did a crusade here in Baton Rouge at Tiger Stadium.
Yeah. See, I don't really know much about him outside of, just what the reputation he's had. And, he did crusades, and I know his son, Franklin Graham, is heavily involved in the evangelical and political arena. But anyway, so those are the thoughts. So anything you want to speak?
Yeah, well, man, on the Billy Graham thing, I think he's, one of the heroes of the faith that we know about for this generation, just because he had this long ministry over multiple, his advice was given to multiple presidents,
yep.
Multiple generations, just without any scandals or anything like that.
Yeah.
No big, he ran the whole race well.
Yes.
And so it's an incredible example and something to hold up in high regard. But I also think that his call was this kind of public call,
mm-hmm.
Like he was the guy in front of that microphone. I got to go and see his training thing up in North Carolina.
What training thing?
So we went for CEF maybe a year ago, we went to Ridgecrest or Asheville, and we had an event. Well, he's got his home. He lives in that area in the
mm-hmm.
Blue Ridge Mountains or somewhere. And he has his office, his, I don't know, it's like his retreat center.
Okay.
The Billy Graham, whatever, training center or whatever. And it's beautiful. I've got some pictures. Maybe I'll put them on. But we got to go in. I got to see his office. You take the little tour or whatever. You go around and you see videos about him. You get to see his stuff. I got to see his traveling podium.
Mm-hmm.
They bring this podium around. You got to see his notes and his sermon notes
mm-hmm.
and things. It's like the Billy Graham Museum.
Mm.
And but we also got to see his office and library. And we couldn't go into his office, but I could kind of peek in. It was a neat setup.
Yeah.
It's like he had it was on the second or third floor of this building. It's in the mountains. It's big windows that are facing these beautiful scenes. And so he had a receptionist area where there was a desk and an office, and then you could see in through past that reception area, you could see his office. And one of the janitors or something that we were kind of small talking
mm-hmm.
with in the elevator told us that if we go up on the third floor, if they let us up on the third floor or second floor, whatever, wherever his office was, to ask for them to show you Billy Graham's prayer room.
Mm-hmm.
He said it's sometimes they don't. You got to go through a conference room. And it's at the corner of the building or whatever, but it's this little prayer room.
Mm-hmm.
Billy, and so we got up there, and there was nobody on the floor. We were the only people up there. There was no staff people. There was nobody. It was just we had. So we just kind of poked around until we found this conference room, and on the back right corner of the conference room there was a door, and so we kind of just walked over there, and I kind of cracked the door open to look to see.
And he was in there.
There was Billy Graham. No. But I cracked the door open to see, and it was this little room, that was longer than it was wide.
Yeah.
And it was just these big windows and this little kneeling. There was a seat.
Like a pew?
Yeah, there was a seated bench along the wall, but then there was a kneeling bench that like if you ever been to, like when the Catholic Church, they do adoration like in a little private chapel or something. They have like this little kneeling bench that's kind of, there's a spot for your arms to be on.
Yeah.
It was like that, but you're like looking out of the window of these beautiful mountains.
Yeah.
And so we got to take turns being in there for a few minutes and praying, and it was neat to see. So, but all that being said, I feel like that, so his calling was something that's very public persona. I just think that we're gonna get to heaven, and there's gonna be this little old lady that nobody ever knew, that was just like this prayer warrior lady, or this crippled person, or something that just you would look at and would not think much of, yet they were waging very effective spiritual war just from their own home, in their own prayer life, or just these unsung heroes of the faith that, Billy Graham's Sunday school teacher, or like all these no-name people that I just think that there's going to be these giants of the faith that we just, like, their calling was not to be with a camera and the light on them, so to speak, like Billy Graham's calling was, but was more of something else, like praying for the president or whatever.
That's interesting. What I hear you saying is you gotta identify what your call is, what God's called you to do, and do that with excellence versus comparing. I think it'd be intimidating to say, man, look at the influence I have versus Billy Graham, and God may be like, hey, look, which I've called you to do is equally as important as what Billy Graham did. But I think in the American system, right, it's like the bigger it is, the bigger you make the assumption that it's better. But I think that's a great point. And God's not going to say, oh, how many souls did you save? No, you didn't make the cut,
Yeah, or that you don't get as big a house or whatever up in heaven. I just think that everyone has a different, that God has, purpose built in everybody's life. And what's that verse that talks about, there's some things that are built for everyday use and some things that are built for holy use. I'll find the verse and maybe put it up. But like there's different callings, and there's different things and different tendencies that we all have, that I think that you're supposed to be a good steward of. But I think what you said about it being like the American system of like how big is the church, or how whatever, like we can, I think, mistakenly confuse that with success or lack of success. And I know that in the Bible, God doesn't look at like the outside type of thing. I think those things are important, the numbers and the metrics and all those things are important tools. But, Jesus himself only had 12 guys that he was running with. So I just imagine that when we get to heaven, we're going to meet people that were just like unsung heroes, that are truly heroes and giants of the faith, strong men and women, just in different capacity, just not what we get to see. People doing homeless ministry, or who knows.
Or the person that I don't know if it was Billy Graham or like a D.L. Moody, or one of the great giants of the faith, and they were talking about this one guy was doing a revival crusade, and like only like 3 people showed up. But one of those 3 was somebody like a Billy Graham, or a giant. So just to that point, it's like, man, I had a crusade where 3 people showed up, and that's the only one I did. But what if Billy Graham was the one that showed up and he gave his life to Christ because of you? I guess we don't really know how much influence we are having, how much we're impacting the kingdom. I guess maybe it's just our heart to say, Lord, I want to impact your kingdom, whatever it is, and however I can do it.